Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I am all right. Okay, so today we're going to talk about criminal history requirements for assisted living facilities and for HCS providers. So there are very many similarities to both provider types in terms of what the criminal history background checks require. You want to make sure that in any of these particular organizations, whether it be an assisted living facility or a HCS provider, that you have a sound system to make sure you are monitoring your criminal history backgrounds and are keeping up not only with the Department of Public Safety criminal history checks, but also the other required checks by Health and Human Services. So let us get into these particular requirements. So I'm going to share my screen. We're going to go to the Health and Human Services guidelines, or the Texas Administrative Code guidelines for assisted living facilities in the state of Texas first. And we are going to look at 553.257, which is the Human Resources Guidance for assisted living facilities. Okay. So a facility must keep current and complete personnel records on a facility employee for review by HHSC staff, that's Health and Human Services, including documentation that the facility performed a criminal history check, an annual employee misconduct registry check, an annual nurse aid registry check. And then it does mention documentation of initial tuberculosis screening and other documentation that you will need to keep in terms of employment. Okay. If you were to go down, you also have to adhere to Texas Health and Safety Code 250.006. Okay. So with that being said, let's look at Health and Safety Code 250.006. Now, mind you, both assisted living and HCS regulations refer to this, so we'll come back to this again to discuss the HCS requirements. But if you were to go to the Texas Health and Safety Code and look up what this particular section 250.006 says, it talks about convictions barring employment. So pretty much any organization that is employing staff that are licensed by Health and Human Services are going to have to abide by this Texas Health and Safety Code section, okay? So if we were to look at section A, it says a person for whom the facility or the individual employer is entitled to obtain criminal history record information may not be employed in a facility or by an individual employer if the person has been convicted of an offense listed in this subsection. So if you were to go down this list, it mentions criminal homicide, kidnapping, unlawful restraint, smuggling of persons, sexual abuse of a child or a disabled individual, as well as indecency with a child, sexual assault, aggravated assault, injury to a child, elderly individual, or disabled individual. You also have bars to employment for anyone who has abandoned or endangered a child, anyone aiding in suicide, anyone with a conviction of agreement to abduct from custody, the sale or purchase of a child, arson, robbery, aggravated robbery, and the list goes on and on. So as you are hiring, you want to come to this particular health and safety code to see if anyone that you are interviewing and you're doing background checks on has any of these bars to employment. Now, there's also another section, and that's section B. And this particular section says a person may not be employed in a position the duties of which involve direct contact with the consumer in a facility, or may not be employed by an individual employer before the 5th anniversary date the person is convicted of. And it lists this as anything that is punishable as a Class A misdemeanor or felony, burglary, theft, misapplication of fiduciary property, fraudulent securing of document execution, false identification as a peace officer, disorderly conduct. And then if you were to go down in section C, it says, in addition to the prohibitions on employment prescribed by subsections A and B, a person for whom a facility license under Chapter 242, convalescent or nursing facilities, or 247, assisted living facilities, is entitled to obtain criminal history record information, may not be employed in a facility license under Chapter 247, which is assisted living facility, if the person has been convicted of Section 30.02 burglary, or under the Penal Code 30.02 burglary for Uniform Code of Military Justice. Okay, so you want to make sure that as you are interviewing staff, potential staff, and you are conducting your background checks, that you are referring back to the Health and Safety Code, Section 250.006. Okay, now this is going to go for assisted living and or HCS. So we already recapped, and I'm going to put the page back over here, what the requirements were for assisted living facilities. And so that's TAC Rule 553.257. You're going to have to conduct a criminal history check, an annual employee misconduct registry check, an annual nurse aid registry check. And on that criminal history check, if you were to go into Chapter 247 that we just mentioned, it does state that criminal history checks have to be conducted once per year. So many people get into opening up their facility, and because this particular section does not say yearly, they assume that they only have to do criminal history checks once, and that's upon hire. And that's not true. You should be doing your criminal history check once per year, along with your annual employee misconduct registry check and your nurse aid registry check, which you should be able to access from the same page. And I will be going to that page in just a minute. Now, let's go and talk about what the requirements are for for home and community-based services, or the HCS program. So the HCS program has their certification standards for staffing under 565.9. Okay, and so under this particular chapter, it says that the facility that, or the program provider that is hiring, has to obtain a criminal history record, okay, of the potential staff member. Okay, it has to include whether or not they have been convicted of any of the offenses listed in Health and Safety Code 250.006, and should also include checks for sex offender. So if you're using the standard Department of Public Safety website, they're going to check for sex offender status, as well as any other offenses that that individual may have been convicted of. Now, along with doing a background check, you also have to do an employee misconduct registry and a nurse aid registry check, okay? And we're going to go to that page. But specifically for HCS providers, you have to check the OIG list of excluded individuals and entities, okay? So that particular page can be found at the Office of Inspector General. And so this is a quick Google search, and you can literally look up LEIE, which is List of Excluded Individuals database, okay, to determine if that person can work in the HCS program, right? So now, what I also want to do is to pull up the employee misconduct registry. So that you all can see that. So if you were just to do a general employee misconduct registry search, you will find the actual Health and Human Services link, and it will take you to the Health and Human Services website, and then you can hit HHSC employability status search. Okay, And so for everybody that's watching, I'm going to drop all of these links into the chat so you won't have to come back and try to catch these links. I'm gonna drop them in the chat once we get done, or once I have the time to drop them in the chat. So once you get to the Employee Misconduct Registry, you're gonna click on Employability Status Check Search. You would put that individual's last name, first name in, and then hit submit. If you need to query multiple social security numbers, you can also put the individual social security number in. And so this is where you would come to check the status of the employability for a staff member for HCS and or assisted living facilities. And if you notice, it says this search will return consolidated results from HHS, Nurse Aid Registry, Medication Aid Registry, and Employee Misconduct Registry. So this is the one stop for the NAR, Nurse Aid Registry, or the EMR, Employability Registry, okay? So that is a general overview of criminal history requirements for both assisted living facilities and HCS providers. The one thing that I also want to mention is that you should have some type of system that is alerting you to the hire dates of staff. Now, that could be a system where you are adding reminders to your emails or to your calendars so that you are alerted once per month to go in and to check for upcoming hire dates or annual anniversary dates of hire for employees, because again, you want to make sure you're conducting your criminal history check yearly, as well as your EMR and NAR yearly for assisted living facilities. And I suggest keeping some type of roster of your staffing with their hire dates on it. So if you do not have an HR system that will alert you, or you are not familiar with using your calendar system to alert you to check for criminal history upon anniversary dates of staff, then you need to have some type of system that is going to remind you that you need to do a criminal history background check, even if it's just once per month for all employees in that month. Now, mind you, you do have to do them by the hire date. So it may be smart to put your reminders into your computer system, your HR system, that the first of every month, you were going to run criminal history checks for everybody who was hired in the month of October or November or December. But ensure that you are keeping up, because you do not want to be cited by a surveyor for not conducting a criminal history search when you should, okay? So put some things in place, put some reminders in place, ensure that you have a system, even if it's not you, if you have an HR person and you're a manager of a facility, or you're the owner of a facility, or you are the program manager and you have an HR person, if you are in the HCS program, that whomever is in charge understands what these requirements are and are going to have a quality assurance in place that these things are done on time, okay? So if you have any other questions about human resources in terms of hiring staff in assisted living or HCS, what the regulation requires, what intricacies there may be, you are welcome to reach out to Real Organized Advocacy. You can find us at www.roaconsulting.services. You can also email us at info@roaconsulting.services, and I'll drop all of that information in the chat, as well as these links should you have any questions or concerns. Thank y'all for dropping in to all the things with Ashley today. We're gonna keep it rocking and rolling, and I'll see you next week.